Live from Sanchez Sound Studios in South Texas, in cooperation with Mighty Vato Productions. Welcome to the Mr. Sanchez Rock and Roll World History, your one-time place to catch up with history's greatest hits, starring yours truly, Mr. Sanchez. Tonight's episode, World War I and its beginnings. We're going to start with All in the Family, a brief history of Europe before the war, with a focus on its royal families and how they were really all related together. So this is called All in the Family before the war. Well, all these families, royalty, that are very weird, they still are, is because of all the inbreeding between themselves. They love power. They love to keep power in the family, so they often marry their cousins and whatnots. So we're going to start with Queen Victoria, the matriarch of Europe. Ruled Great Britain for a very, very long time. Although being not British, her family is really German. How about that? Yeah, her family tree is a bit complicated, so we're going to look at Queen Victoria and principally look at some of her progeny. Here's Queen Victoria up in front, in the center of attention. Next to her is her favorite daughter named after Victoria. This is Vicky. And this is all the grandchildren. This is son of Vicky, Wilhelm, or as she called him, Willie. He's the king of Germany. Behind Willie is his cousin Alex, who's married to Nicholas, who's the king of Russia. And in the back over here is George. George and Nicholas like to look. Well, they look like each other because they're cousins through their mother. So all these cousins, in one way or another, they're all connected and they're all going to war. This is sweeter times before the war. Yeah, it's complicated, but you just need to know what you need to know. All right, so here are the three cousins that are respectively the kings of their own nations. We have the Kaiser, which is a German word for Caesar. He's the king of Germany. The upside down mustache, you can't miss that. In the center, I get confused myself sometimes because they look alike. King George of Britain and his cousin, both of their mothers were sisters, princesses of Denmark, and he is the king of Russia. Russian name for king is Tsar. Again, corruption of the Caesar, the king of Russia. So they're cousins all together, and they're all going to go to war together against each other. We're going to start with the oldest. This is Wilhelm. This is Queen Victoria, Vicky, and Wilhelm. And it's complicated, but we're going to skip that. Yep, that's very complicated. So they're all related somehow. Through Queen Victoria, she passes hemophilia. All the gray are female carriers of hemophilia, which is a condition of the blood. Whereas you get cut, you cannot produce platelets and you can bleed to death. And all of the black squares are a male who is a hemophiliac. The women just carry the disease. They're not affected by it, but the males are affected by it. And we have Queen Victoria at the top, and then her daughter Alice, her granddaughter Alexandria, who's married to Nicholas. Here's Nicholas, and then their four daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Marie, Anastasia, like the Disney movie, and Alexis, who would be future king of Russia had he survived, but he didn't. Here we have a picture of Princess Vicky, mother of Wilhelm. As a princess, she is married to the Prince of Prussia, Germany, and she has a boy, Kaiser Wilhelm. I like showing this picture to my class because it's a very sad story. Sad little boy. If you notice, one of his arms is shorter than the other. Can you tell which one? That's right, the left one, because when he was born a breech baby. He was born feet first. That's not good. That's an automatic C-section in modern day. But he was born feet first, and his shoulder popped out. His left shoulder popped out of socket, and consequently never fully developed like his right arm. So he always had this disability that he had to compensate for, and they tried all sorts of rigorous, very strict therapies and treatments to get his arm, and it was very painful. They would lock him onto a frame for hours, forcing him to use his weaker arm, but it was just very, very depressing, very hard, strict upbringing, compensating for his disability that he would compensate for the rest of his life. Here is the little boy with Grandma, Queen Victoria. You can see that he's very, very sad little boy. Vicky, the mother, would write to Queen Victoria saying all sorts of horrible things about her son, like, I can't believe I gave birth to this such a pathetic creature, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Here he is grown up, so to compensate for his disability, he likes to surround himself with generals and soldiers, and always a lot of medals, and just to sort of give an appearance of strength and to cover up for his disability and his weakness. Okay, here he is with his sons and always on the march. Here he is on the extreme left, covering up with a cape. He's covering up his disability. Yeah, this family is still around today, so there's some kind of prince out there somewhere. This is his wife and also his cousin, so it was one of those kind of things. Now the other two cousins. Now here he is with Nicholas, Kaiser Wilhelm and Nicholas, before the war, respectively, the kings of Russia and Germany before they went to war. Here it would be funny if they traded uniforms. That's what they're doing right there. And here is his other cousin, King of Britain, King George. And this is how all these families are related. So you can see that Queen Victoria of England, and you see Alexandria and Dagmar, the sisters of the Danish royal family, and that's how these two are cousins, and they look like each other, and they're all related. Now these two, sometimes I get confused myself. I think that is Nicholas on the left and George on the right. They grew up together at about the same age, and quite the opposite upbringing from their cousin, the Kaiser. They were adored by their mother. Their mother just loved them, and they were a very playful, very loving family, and they knew each other as children. That's how far back, and they still look the same. And then a distant relation is King Albert of Belgium, son of Leopold. There's George and Albert, and there's three other cousins. And the second royal family we'll talk about is the Austrian Habsburgs. You remember Carlos and Felipe are the same Habsburg family. Carlos is king of parts of Germany, the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain. So we're going to talk about the Austrian part of that family, the Austrian Habsburgs, who are still in control of Austria, while the Spanish Habsburgs lost control of Spain in the War of Spanish Succession. And another famous Austrian Habsburg is Marie Antoinette from French Revolution, and this is their palace in Vienna. Beautiful, beautiful palace. And Their king, lasting almost 60 years, is Franz Joseph. He became king of Austria when he was 18 years old, and he would remain king of Austria at the beginning of World War One. Here he is as an old man. He kept his distinctive whiskers by cracky. And this is his kingdom that is made up of very different ethnicities, nationalities, religions, languages, a sort of hodgepodge of all these different types of people under control of one family. This is his wife, Elizabeth, who was generally known to be the most beautiful princess of all of Europe. Here she is riding a horse. They had very difficult relations. Franz Joseph went to war in Italy and came back with an accidental gift to his wife Elizabeth. Yeah, one of those kind of diseases, an STD, sexually transmitted diseases. So they really didn't get along. What a horrible thing to do. And a few years later, someone stabbed her when she got off of a train. And a few years later, they tried to kill him. Of course, being the emperor of a large empire like that, there's all sorts of would-be assassins from different parts that want their freedom and their liberty from the empire. But it was his collar that saved him. He only was wounded. Now his brother Maximiliano was chosen by Napoleon's nephew, Napoleon III, to be Emperor of Mexico in the 1860s. This is when France wanted an empire in Mexico, but Benito Juarez and other Mexican rebels caught up with Maximiliano, and he was put to death. However, Franz Joseph didn't have a wife. His wife was killed. His brother was killed, but he did have a son. And he sort of rested in the idea that eventually his son will become king himself. The Prince Rudolph here, he had a problem. Yeah, he had a substance abuse problem. Opium, morphine, really hard drugs. And he was caught with a 15-year-old prostitute that he had in a cabin somewhere, and his guards heard a gunshot, and when they opened the door, the 15-year-old prostitute was dead, and Prince Rudolph had committed suicide by blowing off the top of his head. So now Prince Rudolph is dead, Maximiliano's dead, Elizabeth is dead. Now Franz Joseph has this tragedy of a life where he tells his confidants, "Only I survive, I cannot die." He did have a nephew, though. Now, his nephew was very smart, very resourceful, very likable, but he did one thing that really upset the emperor. He decided to marry a woman that he actually loved and not marry a princess of somewhere. So the old emperor was really, really upset with his own nephew that was named after him, but eventually it was understood that he would become the next emperor. Here he is hunting with Kaiser Wilhelm. Of course, in Austria they do speak German, a high German, up in the mountains kind of German. And this is Franz Ferdinand with his wife Sophie. So we're going to exit this one and have so let's set up how the war starts, and then we'll just finish. This is not going to be a long video, I promise. The Napoleon video went way too long. Now, there was an excellent, one of my favorites, a tactician, a genius, really, Otto von Bismarck. One day, a great European war will come out of some damn foolishness thing that comes out of the Balkans. And that's where we have the spark. Now, the Balkans is this part of Europe that I'm going to show you in a little bit. I'm going to show you what started the war. And what started the war, quite frankly, was when Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie decided to, under orders of Franz Joseph, to go to Bosnia, which we see here. Now, Bosnians and Serbians have the same language, religion, customs, traditions, and Serbia wanted to help Bosnia break away from Austria. So there was a plan. There was a plan for Franz Ferdinand. They were going to kill him. Okay, so like I said before, this is the part of the Balkans up here, slowly gaining independence from the old Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, but Bosnia coming under the control of the Austrian Empire. So here again we have Sarajevo, biggest city in Bosnia, supported by Serbia against Austria. On June 28th, and a lot of people don't understand this, that the mentality of Bosnians in June 28th is they remember St. Vitus's Day. It's a holiday where in 1389 they repelled an Ottoman advance. So it's a celebration against the foreigners that are trying to control their land. So they celebrate the Battle of Kosovo, St. Vitus's Day, by remembering the elimination of foreigners trying to invade their land. The foreigner in 1914 is the Austrians. So this is the last photo of Archduke Ferdinand and Sophie as they get into a car with no hood, and just by happenstance, quite by accident, it's a long story, I'll save you from that, but there you hear the gunshots. Him and her are both shot and both killed. So we have different artists, renditions, and here's the guy who did it, Gavrilo Princip. So this starts a whole domino effect about who did it, who's responsible, who is this Princip, and is he Bosnian, is he Serbian, who's the Black Hand, and all these assassination, the conspiracies. And it's the Serbians that said, okay, they find out there's an investigation. So Austria gave Serbia an ultimatum to do these 10 things, or else they'll start a war with Serbia. Serbia is a little country, and Austria is this empire. So Austria had imposed this ultimatum of the 10 things, and Serbia only did 7 of them. I won't give you the details, but after a month they said, okay, that's it. So they start bombing across the river and bombing a hospital and everything. Now Serbians and Russia are both part of an ethnicity called Slavic language, Slavic religion of Orthodox. So the Russians back up Austria, and then Russia is a big country, and Austria said, well, I'm in an alliance with Germany. So Germany steps in, and there's the alliances, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance. Next thing you know, all of Europe is in a horrible war. If you ever get a chance, go to your library and take out this book, All Quiet on the Western Front. I highly recommend it. So we're going to end. Yes. We're going to talk about the beginning of the war, trench warfare, and then we're done. Short video today, about not that long. Now, up until the very end, the cousins Wilhelm and Nicholas, Russia and Germany, they're sending correspondence, and they're trying to avoid the war, but it seems like the war machine has already started. This is Portanales and Sazonov of Russia. They're old friends. They're diplomats. They knew each other for years. And it just so happened that in his pocket, he had the declaration of war. And they couldn't stop it. The curses of all nations be upon you. So let's get the war started. Now, the problem with Germany, being in Central Europe, is that it's fighting a two-front war. In the west is France, the Triple Entente, and on the east is Russia, so they have to fight both ways. And that's going to be very, very difficult, but you need a strategy. Now, when Germany defeated the French in 1870, 1871, they just stormed right through Metz, Verdun, and into Paris, and it took about 8 weeks, and then surrounded Paris, and then you have the siege of Paris, which led to the Commune of Paris, but that's another story. Now, the plan is that France had set up many, many forts between Germany and France to eliminate that scenario from happening again. So the Germans said, we're just going to go through Belgium, and it was like 5 fingers of a hand, 5 fingers from a hand coming down and sweeping and sweeping. And then if anyone plays football, you know what a butt hook pass pattern is for your wide out. It just goes down and they kind of curl. So you're going to go curl, 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 have an army in front of Paris and after Paris. Now the Germans, they fought like devils, they said. On the trains, they said, this war will be over by Christmas. So, for one reason or another, there was an army in front of Paris, but not behind. So here we have a river called the Marne. So about 15 miles away from Paris is where the Germans were stopped. And they were stopped by the French general Joseph Galland, who ordered about 2,000 taxis to take the French soldiers out of Paris onto the battlefield by the Marne River, about 15 miles away. People in the city of Paris can hear the German bombs exploding. It was really, really desperate situation. So that's kind of funny. It's like, how did the French soldiers get to the Battle of the Marne or Miracle on the Marne? Yeah, they took an Uber. What do you tip a guy to take you to the battlefield? So there's like thousands of taxis are just, and that's where they stopped. The Germans did something really smart. So there's this movie out that you can watch called War Horse, that in the beginning, that part of Belgium and France was a lot of forests and woods and very, very lush and green and very nice country. And what the Germans did is that they began to dig. So I'm going to finish with talking a little bit about trench warfare. And then the next video we'll talk about the Americans coming in, the end of the war, and the Peace of Versailles. So here we have pretty much what trench warfare would look like. The Germans were smart. They fought like heck to get all that land, and they were not going to retreat. So they took out their shovels and they dug in, and all through the Western Front, they're pretty much from what is that? The North Sea all the way to Switzerland. You got like a 500-mile front, mainly composed of trenches. And it was one of the more horrible ways to fight a war, because you can't really escape. So these trenches you can still see today, 100 years later, a little more than 100. And all these dimples are all where bombs had just taken up all this earth and caused permanent damage to the environment. Here you see the trees are all stripped of their branches and really horrible stuff. All right, you can still see some of these trenches. I don't know if you ever play, for those gamers out there, there are some World War I games that you fight in the trenches. Paths of Glory is a great movie that I usually show a clip of. just to demonstrate how horrible trench warfare was. It stars Kirk Douglas, who the last time we saw him was Spartacus. Okay, so this is what a trench would look like. Some were better than others. Some were fortified. They ate there. They slept there, and a lot of times they died there. So you would go to the trench for only a week or two, and then you would go back, and then another company or unit would move up and fight in trenches for a week or two. So they had like a rotation. Don't think that you're stuck in a trench in a hole for 4 years. And of course, you're exposed to the elements, so it's super hot in the summertime, summer months, super hot, super cold in the winter. And when it rained, well, you know, you're in water, and your feet are in water, and you might catch a horrible injury called trench foot, and where it infected your skin. There was like a microbe, a bacteria that ate at your skin, and sometimes they had to amputate your feet if you were inside that water. So even like the water would kill you. And of course, you're not alone in the trenches. Here you see some French troops catching a bunch of rats all over the place. So it's like there's rats and there's cockroaches and fleas and mites and all this really ugly stuff. So even when Lego came out with its World War I Lego set, here they are, the boys in the trenches. They even have the rat. Here's the Lego rat right here, part of that. Now, the one good thing that came out of this trench warfare, and I'm very close to being done here, is the Christmas truce of 1914. Both sides thought that the war was going to be over before Christmas, so they were surprised that they're still fighting. Now, this happened mostly between British units and German units, where on Christmas Eve, in various spots in the front, they would sing Christmas carols, and sometimes they would sing together, and sometimes they would switch, and the Germans would sing to the British in the night, and the British would sing to the Germans. And something happened on Christmas Day in various parts of the front. Men came out of their trenches, and nobody fired, not a single shot, and just for one day in this horrible war, there was peace. And men from both sides got together. Here's some British and German soldiers, and there's even an account that they played soccer in one of them. So this is sort of like the one ray of humanity, of hope, of kindness, in the most important holiday of the year, in my opinion. And then once the generals found out that the soldiers were playing soccer and trading between themselves and carrying on in friendship, they started the cannons again. And the next year following, there was never another Christmas truce. We have the horrible German offensive in 1960 at Verdun. They Shall Not Pass by Philippe Pétain. Tolkien was in that battle, and he understood they shall not pass, because there was nothing between Verdun and Paris itself. They had to hold the Germans, and that's where you get from Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. Sacrifices in war. Some men lost their arms, some men lost their legs, but some men lost their minds. And here we have a very creepy picture of a soldier that survived a German bombing. So there's something called shell shock, that the body survives, seemingly completely healthy, but the mind psychologically through trauma does not. And there's insanity and shaking and all these horrible. So this man has clearly lost his senses trying to cope with the Germans bombing one of these battles. Before the attack, there were 20 million shells were fired at the enemy. And then we have the Battle of the Somme, which is another horrible battle, and I think that might be it. Butcher of the Somme, Douglas Haig. You have the cemeteries, the poppies in Flanders. Bigger guns to kill men a lot more gruesome and horrible ways. Next time, we're going to talk about the Americans going in. We're going to talk about more deadly ways to kill people. And we're going to end next time with the Treaty of Versailles. Yeah, big guns. All right, so there you have it. That's the end of this episode. It's the beginnings of World War I. Now, if you paid attention to the press release by Governor Abbott today, it looks like Texas is going to ease up on a lot of the restrictions, open up restaurants, and not open up schools, though. I know, kids. I know. But it looks like the mall might be open, all right? The mall, what I call Teenage Wasteland. So until then, keep doing your assignments. You're doing a great job. Keep a positive attitude. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. Take care of your communities. Until the next episode, this is Mr. Sanchez wishing you the very best. It's rock and roll, baby.